On this day, April 19, 1775, the first battle of the American Revolution was fought in Lexington, Massachusetts, a small town 16 miles from Boston. It was here that the shot heard round the world echoed through the countryside, signaling the beginning of armed conflict between Great Britain and its North American colonies. This event, which became known as the Battles of Lexington and Concord, forever changed the course of history. To understand how these clashes came to be, we must first consider the state of affairs in early 1775. For many years, the people of New England had been growing increasingly frustrated with British rule. The imposition of new taxes and the curtailment of civil liberties had created a climate of resentment. By early 1775, a number of colonial committees of correspondence had sprung up throughout the region, serving as precursors to full-scale revolutionary groups. And while some colonists still hoped for reconciliation with Britain, many were ready to fight for independence. In late April 1775, tensions were especially high in Lexington, Massachusetts, a small town of about 750 people located just 16 miles from Boston. Rumors had spread that a large force of British troops was on the move from the city, and many believed they were coming to arrest or even execute prominent patriots like John Hancock and Samuel Adams. In response to these rumors, the local militia assembled under the command of Captain Parker and marched to the center of town. There they drilled and waited for further orders. However, as the hours passed, it became clear that there was no immediate danger, and after receiving word that British troops were not headed their way, Captain Parker allowed his men to return home. Many of them left their muskets behind, either at the armory or with their fellow militiamen, and went to Buckman's Tavern for a drink and some rest. As the night wore on, more and more militiamen joined them, and soon the tavern was filled with men eager to relax after a long day of drilling. By this point, the tavern was well known as a patriot stronghold, and its owner, Joseph Buckman, was a staunch supporter of the colonial cause. He had recently been fined for allowing the militia to store their weapons in his building, and he continued to defy British authorities by providing them with food and lodging. On this night, however, he had no way of knowing that his establishment would play such an important role in the events that were about to unfold. As midnight passed, a group of British light infantry arrived at the tavern and ordered the men to assemble. They had come under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith to enforce obedience among the unruly colonists and seize any weapons they could find. However, when they arrived at the tavern, they found only a few militiamen present, most of whom were too drunk to offer any resistance. Those who were sober quickly hid their weapons and attempted to flee into the night, but the British soldiers were able to apprehend several of them. In an effort to restore order, the British officers decided to march the prisoners to the nearby village green, where they could be more easily guarded. As they made their way through the streets, however, more and more militiamen came out of their homes and gathered around the prisoners. Soon, a crowd of several hundred people had assembled, and the situation began to get out of control. Frightened by the size of the crowd and the possibility that the prisoners might be freed, the British officers ordered their men to fire into the crowd. At least 8 militiamen were killed and many more wounded. The incident quickly became known as the shot heard round the world. There are many eyewitness accounts of what happened next, but none of them agree on all the details. Some say that the militiamen charged the British soldiers, forcing them to retreat. Others claim that the patriots simply dispersed and fled, but all accounts agree that the shooting on the village green was the last violent engagement of the night. As the sun rose over Lexington that morning, the British soldiers began to disperse, and the militiamen, though badly outnumbered, gave chase. They pursued the British soldiers all the way to Concord, where they finally stopped and made camp. Here, the two sides remained face to face for several hours, each waiting for reinforcements. When the British finally set out to return to Boston, they were met by a much larger force of New Englanders, who had come from all around the countryside to join the fight. The result was one of the most decisive battles of the entire war. The British were forced to retreat, suffering heavy casualties along the way. Though the battles of Lexington and Concord were tactically insignificant, they were of great importance to the Patriots. They marked the beginning of armed conflict between the colonies and British forces and helped to galvanize public opinion in favor of the Revolution. From this point forward, the relationship between the two sides was irreparably broken, and all attempts at reconciliation failed. The events that transpired in Lexington can be seen as a microcosm of the American Revolution as a whole. The small band of British soldiers sent to enforce obedience were met with open defiance and ultimately routed by a much larger force of New Englanders. In the aftermath, the Patriots gained control of the narrative, portraying themselves as brave freedom fighters who had stood up to the tyranny of the British Empire. It is also worth noting that the battles of Lexington and Concord were the first military engagements in which African Americans played a significant role, though they had fought alongside the British in previous conflicts. This was the first time that Black Americans were able to choose which side they wanted to fight for. Many of them took advantage of this opportunity and fought bravely for the Patriot cause, helping to secure victory at Concord and paving the way for future generations of black soldiers. Today, the site of the battles of Lexington and Concord is a National Park Service site. Each year, thousands of visitors come to this hallowed ground to learn about the events that took place here and to pay tribute to those who fought and died for American independence. As we reflect on the events of April 19, 1775, we are reminded of the courage and sacrifice of those who fought for our nation's founding principles. Their bravery on the battlefield and their commitment to liberty and justice for all have inspired generations of Americans to strive for a better future. The story of the shot heard round the world is one that has captured the imagination of people around the globe. It is a tale of courage, determination, and the pursuit of freedom in the face of overwhelming odds. The events that unfolded in Lexington, Massachusetts on April 19, 1775, are a testament to the power of the human spirit and the enduring legacy of those who fought for our nation's founding ideals. Thank you for watching.